Good evening, depending on where you are, and good morning, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. Episode 77 is here, and we're joined by a four-time guest, S.L. Kanthan. Y'all probably know who he is. He's pretty famous now at this point. He's a geopolitical analyst. He's a writer, a columnist for Sputnik India. He has his own Substack site. He has a lot of great ideas, and I discovered SL on Twitter last year, about 7 months ago. And after I discovered him, I had to reach out to him and say, can you please come onto my show and discuss this information with the rest of the world? And he did so graciously back about 6 months ago, which was episode 36, believe it or not. So go back and watch episode 36 and then subsequently 50 and 57. And now today, episode 77. Welcome back, my friend, S.L. Kanthan. And we appreciate you accepting that invitation again.
Thank you, Kiko. It was always a big pleasure and fun chatting with you.
Yes, and the forum knows that when we talk, it's usually not a brief encounter. It goes on and on, but the audience appreciates it. We have a lot of issues to get into today. But before we get into them, just a small ad, just thanks to all the supporters, listeners. We've reached over 160 different countries. Basically, we've covered every continent in the world, every corner of the world. We have quite an international audience. 42% of our listenership and viewership is located outside of the United States. And that was always the point of the forum, is to make this an international community forum. And that's only made possible with esteemed guests like S.L. Kanthan, Norm Finkelstein, Medea Benjamin, and people covering the geopolitical world. This is a world crisis mode that we're in. I know that that's an overused term, but there's so many occurrences happening at the same time that it's hard to kind of keep up with the news, as I was telling SL off camera. But I'm sure that SL will try to make sense of some of this lunacy and chaos in the world. We're going to focus on two specific articles of his, one talking about the Belt Road in China and some of the initiatives out of China, the peace initiatives. And then we're going to also talk about the Gaza-Israel conflict. That's an ongoing process, really started since 1948, if you want to go back to the historical moment itself. And I have some other questions and concerns too that I'm pretty sure that SL can provide some insight into. But I just want to say one more thing. Subscribe for free to Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. It doesn't cost you a dime. You just expand your mind a little bit. And remember, you can't unthink free thought at all. So just subscribe for free. We have quite a listenership. Again, as I was saying, this is a growing platform. And hopefully SL can break some news later on to the show about his possible starting of his own platform, which would be great because SL is a crucial part in understanding the world. And we need a lot more people like SL to sort of promote this information and give a more balanced view of the world, where everything is not just based on the United States and Great Britain and Germany and France. We have to have a balance in the world some kind of way. And so hopefully we can discuss this along the way. I wanted to ask Mr. Kanthan to start. We know that you're from Bangalore, India. We know that you have a background in tech. But I had to get this question kind of out of the way before we start talking about China and Gaza and Israel and whatnot. We have three people tied to India running for the president of the United States. We have Nikki Haley, or prominent. There are more Indians than this, but we're just focusing on the ones that the media talks about. One in particular, Nikki Haley, and then you have Vivek Ramaswamy, and then you also have Dr. Shiva. You have three Indian Americans running for president. What is your view on those three candidates? I think I already know the answer, but I want my audience to know what you think about those three candidates.
Okay. Well, I'm so sorry, and I deeply apologize to the Americans that my country had to send to your country people like Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. My God. But I like Shiva, Shiva thinks out of the box, and he has a lot of truths, and he's not in the mainstream stuff. But Nikki and Vivek, oh my God, just absolute clowns, absolute clowns. And so Nikki Haley is just a maniac, warmongering maniac who doesn't know anything. And she spews just hatred. And she's just bad news for the US. So, so I hope she gets like a 0%, vote in the primaries.
She probably will.
Yeah. So, and Vivek is a little bit better, but compared to Nikki, uh, but he's also a scam. You look at his life; it's like a big scam. He went to law school. He's not a doctor or anything, but he started this pharmaceutical industry, and he sold off, fake. So far he hasn't had one medicine. And what he does is he goes and looks at all the failed drugs, okay? And then he chooses a failed drug, and then he tries to rehabilitate it and tries to make money off it. And the way he made money in the first drug is he chose a drug that had, failed in phase 3 trials and so on. And then he said, "Oh no, this has the potential." So he got all these the investors to chip in money to develop this drug, and then before it passed the trials, he sold off the company, okay, the startup. And then the people who bought the company, which basically had only one drug, and then that drug failed, but he already made the money. Mm-hmm. It's like a big scam. And and also when he talks about geopolitics, it's so stupid. Like he says, "Oh, I'm gonna be like Richard Nixon, who went to China and he pulled China away from Russia, and now I'll do the same to Russia." Okay, and I'm gonna go to Russia and say, "Hey, Russia, let's be friends." So you sever the relationship with China. It's just a ridiculous proposition, because for one, Russia and China, they would depend on each other a lot now. Back in 1972, when Nixon went to China, there was virtually no relations between Russia and China. So it was an easy task, and but China had nothing to lose. So there's no way that Russia is now going to sever the relationship. It's the number one trade partner. And if you look at all the stuff that has been happening, so basically with China, it saved Russia from the US sanctions over the last 1.5 years. And so Putin and Xi Jinping, they have met like, I don't know, 40 times, and they're like best friends, and they have a vision of the multipolar world with BRICS and so on that we talked about before. So there's no way in hell that Russia is going to sacrifice its relations with the number one trade partner and the number one partner for the future. And plus, it's not in Russia's philosophy, So Russia's philosophy will be, "Oh, so you want to be friends? Wonderful. We'll be friends with the US, we'll be friends with Europe, and we'll be friends with China." You know, why would they want to lose the friendship with China? So Vivek Ramaswamy is a clown, and Shiva, check him out on with Twitter and stuff. He's a pretty smart guy, and actually, he asked me for like a chat, something like this, you know. But his secretary, she made it so difficult that that I didn't bother following up. She's like, "Oh, fill out this the questionnaire before you can would talk to Shiva." It's like a long questionnaire. I'm like, man, I don't have the time for this.
But see, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I actually reached out to Dr. Shiva about a month ago. And the thing I notice about these people who are positioning themselves as against the establishment, I noticed that the level of access to these people, I feel like sometimes is unnecessarily difficult. And to me, if you're trying to reach a broader audience, why are you being so? I don't want to say that they're hiding something, but why are you making it difficult to keep the communication going if you're trying to get your message out to lots of different types of people? And I've noticed that even with RFK, I reached out to RFK. I reached out to so many people. I can't even tell you who, people that I don't even agree with at all, and I still reach out to them. At least RFK's team responded back to me, but Dr. Shiva, I haven't heard anything back from. But I had a question about Shiva, especially because I feel like he, in particular, he is different from the two candidates that we mentioned before, Vivek and Nikki. But do you feel like he's putting his egg in one basket with this Zionism line? I understand that Zionism is a serious problem to him, and it's a serious, like, we see this stuff. We've talked about this for years. Zionism is not something that's new in the mainstream media. It's not new in the political world. People know about it. I just feel like now that more people are like, okay, I'm tired of self-censoring myself because of these people, who are presenting the information. Can't say this without being accused of being anti-Semitic. I think that that's been a theme for years. People have always had these feelings, but now there's been a time where people are just tired of keeping it inside and they're expressing themselves. But do you feel like he runs the risk of becoming just a single issue representative when it seems like all he talks about in his interviews is Zionism? Like, what other topics are you talking about? That's my Shiva. Like, that seems to be his one topic.
Oh, okay. That I didn't know. To be frank, I only watched one of his videos where he talks about the swarm effect
Oh yeah.
and how people make decisions. And I thought that was pretty smart, but I haven't really followed up with him, so I don't know about his Zionism obsession.
Yeah, I'm not even like, I've watched 8 of his recent interviews, and all of his interviews recently have been around this topic. And to me, that raises a red flag because I'm always trying to look at different perspectives. And I agree with him on that perspective, but I'm like, why is he going so hard? It's like one thing. It's like none of his interviews talk about anything else but that. And that's what I'm saying to myself. Is this like a controlled opposition type thing? Like, what is this about? But for now, I give him the benefit of the doubt because at the end of the day, all these people are running for office. They're politicians, and so they're not running for no reason at all. There's obviously a reason why they're running for office. Because if he was that anti-establishment, you have to understand that you're going against the deep state. You're going against every single organization that is going to be like, you know what, screw you, Dr. Shiva. We're going to keep you off television. We're going to keep you off. We're going to cut off your funding. We're going to do everything we can to keep your voice at a minimum. So maybe he knows what he's doing. I don't know, but I think this is going to be an interesting landscape for 2024 in the United States. But I wanted to get that stuff out of the way because I know people, it kind of drives headlines. I'm not as interested in that, but I know that it's important for entertainment value sometimes for the audience. But I want to shift into your article about the Belt Road initiative. Now, did you originally publish that on your Substack, or was that originally published on your Sputnik site?
On Sputnik.
Okay, so because I
Yeah.
noticed that the title changed when I was reading it. I read both of them, and like I said, interesting article, write up. I like the way you concluded about what makes China different from the United States. We can go into that some, but can you tell the audience what is Belt Road? What do those two things mean, and what is this vision that China has?
Sure. So we know about the Marshall Plan, right? That the U.S. did after World War II, and they built Germany and Japan, and that made a huge difference. So, in a similar concept, so just take the Marshall Plan and multiply that by 1,000, okay? And that's Belt and Road. So it's basically the belt. It stands for the land routes that links China to large parts of the world, like Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. So now we have trains that go from China to Spain, from China to London. It is so huge, right? I mean, you look at the map, it's like we're close to 9,000 kilometers away, Spain to China. And they have built the railways, and but nobody knows about it. It's really astonishing, you know. So that's the belt part, and then the road part is the sea lanes, the seaports. So China has now partnership or partial ownership or full ownership in like maybe 150 seaports in the world. So they trade, And if you look at the top 10, the busiest seaports in the world, 7 are in China. So the Belt and Road is, so it, that's the core is for trade, because China understood that, hey, we are going to be this trading nation, manufacturing nation. And China has been the world's number one trading nation since about 2009. And for 120 countries in the world, China is their number one trade partner. So China is a huge trading country, and so this makes sense that if if you want to trade, you want to spend money on the infrastructure, and you cannot depend on the other countries to do it, because a lot of countries are very poor, or they don't have the investments, because even if you look at the European countries now, a lot of countries don't have money, for the infrastructure. It's so sad. But they have like freaking billions of dollars to send to Ukraine to start a war, But you go to Italy and you say, hey, Italy, you are a beautiful nation. You have wonderful, civilizational history. Why don't you fix your damn seaports? And you can be much richer. And you have all these, great location in the Mediterranean, but their seaports are all like junk now. And they could be like this trading hub. but they don't, they don't have the money to do it. So, and if you look at the African countries, then obviously the problem is much, much worse. They cannot build their own railways, seaports, airports, etc. So then China comes in and builds them, bing, 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 and it's a win-win. So when it so okay, so this the concept of so if well okay, so when Xi Jinping he made the announcement in 2013, the Western media didn't even bother reporting on it. They're like, man, what is this nonsense about building railways? It's like so like 19th century. Look at these Chinese. Oh my God. We in America, we have Facebook, baby. And this guy, and this guy is talking about trains. My God, these Chinese are so dumb. And then you fast forward to 2023, and now 150 countries are now members of the Belt and Road Initiative. So it used to be called One Belt, One Road, and then they changed the name to Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI in short. So now 150 countries belong to BRI, and almost half of China's trade is now happening with BRI. So this is why, also, by the way, China is not like the Soviet Union. So a lot of people I see on social media, they say, yeah, look how the USSR collapsed, and the same thing will happen to China because we can just sanction them, blah, blah, blah. But China is not the USSR, right? The USSR was very, separated from much of the world. But now you have 1,500 freight trains per month. They go from China to Europe, and they carry billions of dollars of goods. And if you look at EU-China trade, it's like we're close to $900 billion a year. So China is really plugged into the global economy, and they, so they have all the goods that the world needs. And if you look at the cars, so have you seen a Chinese car in the US? Probably not, right? Yeah. But now China this year became the world's number one the exporter of cars. It's like really shocking, because just 4 or 5 years ago they were nobody, and now first they surpassed the US, and then they surpassed South Korea, and last year they surpassed Germany, and now they have surpassed Japan, and they are making these amazing the electric cars. So if you go online and if you search for a Chinese electric car, oh my God, it's like so high tech. It's like so advanced. So there are no sticks, like there's no like a stick to move it to, from a park to reserve to ND1, 2. It's all on, it's like a laptop, or like, the iPad, it's all just with touch screen, and it's so high tech with GPS and all of that. fantastic, and they have like a huge range, so you can buy a Chinese electric car for $5,000 or $100,000. And they have, so they have like mastered the supply chain. And now, like, if you look at, like, say, with Tesla, that builds almost half of all the cars in the world in Shanghai. The Shanghai, the Gigafactory is huge. And what a lot of people don't understand, like when people think of China, like they think all these like really low wage, guys making about $2 an hour, making with Tesla and just, like doing the assembly. But the fact is, 95% of the components of the Teslas that are made in China, they're actually made by Chinese firms. So the Chinese companies, they make the wheels of Tesla, the doors of Tesla, the batteries of Tesla, the engine, the electrical, the components, all this stuff, right? And these cars are not any lower quality than the ones made in the US. And in fact, so Tesla ships the China-made cars to Europe. And but this is the new China, that is very high tech, and they are shifting to the high-end manufacturing, the higher value, and the Belt and Road, it comes into play in that, So, but they don't want to move away from manufacturing, So they have spent about $1 trillion on the infrastructure on the Belt and Road projects, So not all of them are, successful, and some of them have some problems with bribes and stuff, but overall, it's a huge success, and that the $1 trillion of the investments, they're now worth like $5-6 trillion. And this is very futuristic, So China is not thinking 1 year, but 2 years, They're thinking 10, 20, 30 years, And they really have a win-win philosophy. And especially like if you look at the African nations, so you have 1 billion people in Africa, but 600 million people, they don't have access to the electricity, So we in India are slightly better, we have some electricity, but but we need to fix too, So we need, so if you look at the electricity, the production, so both India and China have the same number of people, about 1.4 billion people in each country. But China produces like 6 times more electricity than India. So, this the Belt and Road, it started out as sort of a selfish thing, Yes, okay. So, for example, if there is this the mine, like in Africa, and because of bad infrastructure, let's say it takes 2 weeks to transport the raw materials from the mine to the seaport. Then China comes and builds this amazing the railway, and they're able to cut the time from 2 weeks to 2 days, right? And it's now it's a win for China, and that railway is going to increase the exports and the GDP for the African country. So it's a win-win, So, and then, but similarly, so like we take for granted seaports, but not every country but has the ability to build a really awesome seaport. So there's a lot of technology involved. So then only China can do that, and they can make it so amazing, So like if you have a chance, but go to YouTube and check out the Shanghai port, okay? And there are some parts of the Shanghai port that is 100% run by robots and the artificial intelligence and the autonomous vehicles, So there are these the cranes that automatically move the containers from the ship to the ground, and there's the driverless vehicles. They move the containers around. It's like science fiction, and they operate 24 hours a day, and they use 5G, artificial intelligence. The Internet of Things. So only China can do that, and they spend a lot of money on the infrastructure, and they understand some basic things that the capitalism cannot understand, or they don't want to understand, So for example, like if you go to China and you take a bus, right? So the bus ride will cost you 0.02 yen. Yuan. 0.02 yuan. Okay, so 7 yuan is $1, right? So it's like 1/3 of 1 penny in the US. So just imagine, if you can take a bus. So if you can take 3 bus rides for 1 penny in the US, right? And how that will change the life of so many people. And if you have a lot of buses, okay, so you need a lot of buses, first of all, and then it will cost you like 1 penny a day to go to work, right? And these the Chinese buses are so high tech. Okay, so don't think of the bus like the U.S. No, they're like very clean. They, most of them are like, the electric buses, and you pay for the buses with your smartphone. Like just like when you go to Starbucks, you just put the smartphone right next to the machine, and it reads and is going to subtract the 1/3 of a penny from your account. So, and same thing with the subways. China spends so much money on subways. Just Shanghai alone has like 900 kilometers of subway. Same thing with Beijing. And they have these and it's all like so clean, so beautiful, so high tech, so punctual, so frequent. Like you don't have to wait for more than 2 minutes maximum. Like most of the times, you go to the platform, 30 seconds later, there's a train, and it's like brand new, spick and span clean. There are no homeless people. There are no drug addicts. There's no fight. You know, there's no trash. Everything is like super clean. And the metro stations, a lot of them, oh my God, you know, they look like museums, you know,
Oh,
with
wow.
beautiful art, with beautiful artistic stuff. And they have this like, I mean, at the one museum, one metro, where they hang paintings on the wall, right? Like
Hmm.
very nice paintings. But can you imagine like having a painting like that in Manhattan subway? It will be gone in like 1 hour.
I
You
have a
know?
question. So,
Yeah.
when did you develop such an interest in China, and how often have you gone to China?
Okay. Very good question. So, like, I but never cared about China, you know, because I thought it was like India, you know, just a very poor country, very polluted. You know, what is there to see in China other than people making iPhones, you know? And man, you can't even, you know, breathe the air. You'll probably get sick if you go to China. And they probably eat snakes everywhere, and they eat rats. You know. So, but in 2015, I read an article saying China's PPP GDP is now the largest in the world and has surpassed the US. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? What is this PPP GDP? And then I started to do some research. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is like really amazing, you know? And then I went to China in 2019 when the COVID, it happened. Uh, well, I was in China when the COVID outbreak happened. And everybody around me was sick. Okay, I'm sure they all had COVID. Everybody, people were coughing. But nobody knew, you know, that it was COVID. You know, like people just thought it was, you know, flu. And well, I have a good, the immune system, you know, so I didn't get sick. Um, but the 2019, the trip was like the most amazing vacation I ever had. I went to Xi'an, you know, like where you see uh, the terracotta warriors from 2000, 200 years ago, and you learn all this, you know, history, and to actually see these walls, the Great Wall of China, you know, built 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. And I went to this Buddhist temple where they had a statue which was transferred from India to China in 300 AD, 1,700 years ago. So it was just like amazing. I mean, it's like one thing to read about history and then to actually go see things, you know. And you see the Great Wall of China, and you know, and you try to walk up, you know, after like 20 minutes, you have like absolutely no breath. And then you look at all these huge rocks that they used to build this wall, and then you think, oh my God, okay, so it's so hard for me to just walk. So just imagine, you know, how people had to actually carry these
Hmm.
rocks up in the mountains and build stuff. And then just like, the high tech, the streets, everything is so clean, you know. So they had pollution, like Beijing. Um, Half of the days were polluted, but half of the days were very clear, you know. So you could see like the mountains far away. And the people are nice, they work hard, and they have this, so you don't see one like the homeless person or beggars. So they have this socialist system where they would try to lift everyone up, And just 40 years ago, China was very, very poor, right? Like something like but 90% of the people, they lived below the poverty line or in the extreme poverty, like making less than $1-2 a day, whatever. And they lifted all those 700, 800 million people out of poverty. So I became very fascinated. So I'm not like a socialist or a communist. So I don't even know what they mean. But I like the fact that they focus on the infrastructure. They help the poor people, and they so like the progress is just unbelievable, Kego, and they are like developed in a 360 degrees way, so you have like like if you go to Saudi Arabia, so they have the oil. Okay, great, and then like maybe like if you go to some country like Brazil, they have like one or two good things that they did well. And you look at China, they developed every aspect, So they developed, the education. So they have like Tsinghua University, which is ranked now #1 in the world for the computer science, the electrical engineering, and so on. And then if you look at patents, manufacturing, roads, infrastructure, the art, health. Okay, so now the Chinese are living longer than Americans do. Can you believe that? People think, oh, China is so poor, so dirty, and they're living longer than Americans. So it's, so I believe it's like 79 years or maybe 78 is now the life expectancy, And the socialist part, so you get to retire at the age of 60, 60. And if you are a blue collar woman, then you can retire at the age of 50, 50. What a wonderful life, right? And then you see, like in the US, all these, the old women have to work at Walmart at the age of 70 to make $7 an hour. Why? That's like so ruthless, right? Like you have trillions of dollars in the US, and I saw that in like, the rural America, 30% of the hospitals are going to get closed because they don't have funding, So you go to rural China, like they have bullet trains in rural China. They have 5G in rural China. So the farmer may be poor, but the government will give the farmer a $100,000 freaking amazing the harvesting machine, drones to spray the pesticides, So, they have this like the concept of developing everybody and to help everybody, And so there are but so many ways to look at it. But the one way is that who is in charge in China, right? So if something goes bad, the world will blame who? The Communist Party, the CCP, or the CPC. So if the GDP, if China has the recession, they will blame Xi Jinping. So the Communist Party has a lot of power, but they also have the responsibility, and they, as they say, the buck stops at the CCP. But if you look at the U.S. or India or Europe, what is the best thing that happens? You just shift from one politician to another politician, right? And so you ask 5 people in the U.S. Why are things bad, and you'll get 5 different answers, right? One will blame the Democrats, one will blame the Republicans, one will blame socialism, one will blame the illegal immigrants, whatever, But at the bottom line is that the problems don't get fixed, right? So you have something like 1 in 4 bridges in the U.S. are in a very bad condition. And in the U.S., there are some people who are still using 2G, 2G for their cell phones. And I've seen the people say, "Oh, I'm in the rural America, and I have to pay $150 a month for my cell phone, and I don't even get proper signals." So if you live in China, so you get 5G, like the world's best 5G, for $2-3 a month. So how are they able to do it? How are they able to take the bullet trains that has no comparison in the U.S.? They're now working on bullet trains that go at 600 kilometers per hour. So just imagine we're going from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 45 minutes.
Is there a billionaire class in China? I'm curious about, because when you mentioned the electronic cars, I thought that was interesting. You said basically people in China have the option. You can buy a $5,000 electric car, you can buy a $100,000 electric car. Why is that? Why such a variance in according to, I guess, who the person is?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So if you look at the wealth inequality, China is actually pretty bad. If you look at the Gini coefficient index, it's 33 or something. So yes, there are about 1,000 billionaires in China. 1,000 billionaires. Okay, and there are something 7 million millionaires in China. So when I was in Shanghai, my mind was blown away by how many Porsches were parked in front of my hotel. So I walk out of the hotel, I look at the parking lot, Porsche, BMW, Audi. So the Chinese buy 2.5 times more BMWs than Americans do. And they buy the same number of the Teslas as Americans. And they buy more Porsches than Americans or Germans. So there is a there's certainly a very at the top, the 10% is very wealthy, and they're doing very well. But here's the key, right? So when you look at the poor people in China, like you go to a farmer and you ask him, so how much money do you make? And he will say about $500 a month, you know? But that farmer, he owns a home, right? So that's the communist thing about the housing, land. So the home ownership rate in China is about 91%. So well, everybody has a home, and the farmer has no mortgage, right? So how many Americans can say that they don't have any mortgage? Most people are.
It's like it's diametrically opposite of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of Chinese, they buy homes with like, I mean, the cities are now very expensive, but a lot of people, they put like a 40-50% down payment. So the mortgage is not that big. And if you live in the rural China, there is no mortgage in your life. Like if you are a farmer, the Communist Party will give you some land and a house to live. And if you're very poor, sometimes they will come and do the renovation of your house. Okay. Communism. I mean, does it ever happen in the US where the government knocks on your door and says, Mr. Kiko, your uh, backyard is not very good. So we, the government, are going to renovate your house for you. So they renovate the house, and sometimes they build these like brand new homes, like thousands and thousands of homes, for the poor people. So that's amazing. So and
I was gonna say what you're saying makes sense. It would make sense why there's so much disinformation towards China and propaganda directed towards China, because what you're describing sounds like the opposite of the United States. Like the mindset is opposite. The results are opposite. Like everything is opposite. So why would the United States want to eliminate the stuff that you're talking about here with the peace and the railroads are functioning great, the bridges are great, the aqueducts are great. Like, why would people here want to give China credit when those are our deficiencies? Like, those are the things that are negatives, for us. Like, we're the opposite of peace. We're warmongers. So it makes sense why there's so much information, bad information, and propaganda directed towards China. And I remember even when I was before the bubble, before the crash in 08, 09, I used to watch Bloomberg and CNBC and all these channels, these economic stations. And you know what they would say, SL? They would say stuff like, China's taking over Africa. They take over the poor Africans, like look at all the business owners in Africa. They're all Chinese people. Look at all the people, they're taking over Africa. You would think the Chinese people are just like evil, driven by money type people. But you say to yourself, how does that make sense? How can it be communistic in one sense, but then they're super capitalistic and cannibalistic in Africa? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Which narrative is it? You know?
yeah, yeah. So by the way, like you hit the nail on the head when you said the US and China are very opposite in many ways. And that's why the US doesn't want Americans to know what is happening in China, right? Because an American kid may say, wait a minute. Okay, well, I have to go to college and graduate with $100,000 of debt. while the Chinese guy, he pays like $2,000 a year to go to the best college in the world, and he basically graduates with zero debt, right? And he gets to start a life at the age of 21, zero debt and a job. He has a good life. Why do I have to have $100,000 of debt when I graduate from college, right? And also, I mean, the universal health care. So China is able to provide universal health care for 1.4 billion people. Hello? Why don't I have that as an American?
No excuse whatsoever. Everything you're saying, I think that's what it is. And I'm not even gonna lie, SL, you describing this stuff, it's almost hard to believe. I know you're not making it up, but being from the States, I think people who are already bitter towards the rest of the world, when you say stuff like that, it makes them even more bitter because they never, because I think it's an admission that this country is never going to give them what they need. And so they automatically want to blame everything is the government's fault, the government's fault. And I understand that I'm very distrustful of government, but it's not because government has to be bad. It's because the way our government is ran here, our government is messed up, and I think people have to keep that in mind because there has to be a purpose of the government. We've allowed it to get to this point that it's at right now. I mean, it's just out of control. But I think that this stuff that you're describing is definitely what most Americans would want. I know that's what most Americans would want. But we talk about North Korea's been brainwashed, China's brainwashed, Russia's brainwashed. No, the United States is the most brainwashed country that's based on my vantage point. That's what I see. This country is definitely, it has its own propagandistic tools, and that's the reason why it's able to kind of keep it. I mean, just like COVID. It's like, why did the Chinese release this virus on? I mean, all this shit. I mean, they could create any excuse that's possible to like take the attention off of us. Dr. Kiko's $150,000 in debt from higher education. You just mentioned that. I mean, you're speaking to me. I'm $150,000 in debt. Even though I have a PhD, I have all this money. I'm probably not going to pay it back. But then it's like, they don't pay their loans back. When does the U.S. government ever pay their loans back?
Yeah, it's so stupid.
Citizens to pay their money back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is so predatory. I don't understand why you have to be a prey on your own people. My God, because you provide Bakiko with a very good education, so he's able to graduate with no loans, and he's going to spend the money on the economy, okay, and that makes the economy better, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what is better, Bakiko, making payments to the banks every day, or buying a car, traveling around, buying gadgets for his podcast, buying a good education for his kids. So, like, they don't believe that. It's just a very predatory system, and the same type of the mentality also goes to foreign policy. Mm-hmm. So they cannot, but look at Ukraine, right? So the U.S. gave about $200 billion or something to wage a war, and that destroys Ukraine. Hello, why didn't you spend $200 billion doing good things in Ukraine? Okay, start a factory in Ukraine, build roads and railways and airports and seaports in Ukraine, and you help Ukraine have good relations with Russia, right? That makes the world a better place, and you also win. And they can't see that. No, 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 we cannot give money for good things. We only spend money for wars. Like Palestinians in Gaza, with 2 million people, and you're like bombing, like spending billions of dollars bombing it every day for more than a month. What kind of a psychopathic thing to do? And but you can spend that same money on making Gaza beautiful. Like, rather than fucking bombing a hospital, build a hospital, and then the people in Gaza will love you.
But
Build a school rather than, I mean, they're like bombing children in school. What kind of a monstrosity is that? You know? So, like you look at China, right? So, they want peace in the world, you know, because that fits their the economic model. They're a businessman. The businessman doesn't want a war. China doesn't want wars that are going to blow up its but trains. China doesn't wars that are going to blow up its seaports, or the wars that are going to disrupt the supply chain. China wants peace everywhere because peace means more manufacturing, more exports, more business, and more happiness. That's the Chinese model. You know, I don't understand the U.S. It's just like uh, terrible, terrible. Like, show me one area where the U.S. brought in but two opposite parties and help them make peace. Like, the US is, I am the richest country in the world. I'm the most powerful country in the world. Well, okay, but what are you doing with that money and that power? Did you go to North Korea and help make peace between North Korea and South Korea? Did you help Palestinians and the Israelis make peace? Did you help Russia and Ukraine make peace? What did the U.S. do? Like in, but like in Afghanistan for 20 years, they bombed. Show me one hospital built by the U.S. in Afghanistan in the last 20 years of occupation. Show me one school that says, the Americans school of Kabul, like where 5,000 the Afghans are studying. Show me a beautiful, well, that provides water to the Afghan farmers. Show me a railway built by the U.S. that helps the farmers will export their goods to the rest of the world. Nothing, but they, fly this $100 million fighter jet that drops a $1 million missile on a guy who makes $1 a day. What kind of a, terrible philosophy is that?
But see, this just tells you who's running this society. Is the deep state is running it over here, because everything that you're saying is unveiling like the reality on the ground. So why would the United States build other countries when we don't even have our infrastructure in order? You said this yourself. So how are we going to go initiate peace in another country when we have chaos here? When we don't have the roads that are the best roads here? We don't have public transportation, mass public transportation in this country. And and we're smaller than China as far as land mass. We have fewer people than China. So why don't we have the services that those people have in China? It goes back to the propaganda again. It's because we put all of our energy into focusing on everybody else and ignoring people here. I mean, look how quick it took them to go to Israel. Blinken went right to the Middle East, Biden went straight on a plane to Jerusalem. He hasn't visited East Palestine yet in Ohio. He didn't even visit. But that tells you right there, he barely stayed any time in Hawaii. Like it took him forever. And that's the United States. But that why don't people ask those questions? Is there something wrong with that picture when they're not even going to the places in their own country, but they're willing to fly to a foreign country? You know what that tells me? There's something there that's in their business interest. As part of their business model, war is the business model for the United States. And that's clearly what that tells me, that war is the business model. It's the opposite of what you're describing of China.
Yeah. So this, I mean, the African leader, so he was meeting with, I don't know, like a German ambassador or something, and the meeting was recorded, live. So he said, when the Americans and the Europeans, they come to Africa, they talk about China. When the Chinese, they come to Africa, they talk about Africa. Okay, so I sit with a Chinese guy, and he talks about what airports I need, what seaports I need, what railways, roadways, dams, you know. So that's what China focuses on. And the US goes to Africa, and they go, oh, don't be so close to China. What is your problem? I mean, do you have anything good to say? Like, do you have anything to help me fix my country? Okay, don't talk about other countries. You know, such a crazy policy. And but China does a lot of free stuff too. So they build. Okay, so going back to Belt and Road, so I want to mention this. So Belt and Road just started off as the basic infrastructure needed for trade. So it was just purely based on China's interests. But then what happened was it became what I call as Belt and Road Plus. So this is when the other countries, they started saying, hey, China, well, you're so good at building infrastructure. While you are building a railway, the long distance railway, but can you also build some roads in my city? Can you also build a metro system in my city? Can you build a hospital, a school, a housing project, a big, stadium for sports, all that stuff? And China said, okay. And many times, China would fully fund it and do it for free. So you go to Africa and you find these like beautiful schools, like worth 40-50 million dollars, and you see all these, I mean, the African children, like wearing nice uniforms, going to beautiful classrooms, with satellite, with TV, 4G internet access. So how beautiful is that? And they build hospitals, free hospitals in Africa. China builds, solar farms. The hydropower dams, right? So because if you look at Africa, the lack of electricity is a huge problem, right? And you need massive projects, so you cannot just produce electricity with, small stuff. So China would go and build the hydropower dam for like $100 million. And that will provide electricity to millions of people, right? And as long as the water is there, it's going to do it forever. Right? So it's like really changing people's lives. And so, for example, Xi Jinping, he once said, "Okay, I'll provide a satellite with TV to with 10,000 villages in Africa." You know, when the U.S. president they say stuff like that, it never happens. You know, but now, like after 7, 8 years, Xi Jinping really provided with 10,000 villages with a satellite with TV, you know, and these are kids who have never seen TV before, you know. So just imagine the impact on their lives with things like that, you know. So and then the Chinese scientists they go to Africa and they build these the agricultural colleges where they train the African farmers. You know, because there's a lot of science in the agriculture, right? So you need to know how to get the right seeds, the pH of the soil, what is the right amount of water, sunlight, where to grow, when to grow, how to harvest, the fertilizers, how to fight the pesticides. So there's a lot of science in farming. It's not for stupid people anymore. Farming is so now China is really helping Africa become um self-sustainable and self-reliant and independent, right? So it's like saying you give somebody a fish or you teach them how to fish, right? So that's what China is doing.
How one final question on this before we transition, but so who is responsible for all this infrastructure in China? Who's building this stuff in Africa? Is it strictly engineers or scientists? Like, what type of people are these? Like, who's building all these bridges? Is it just engineers and scientists, or who is it? Other people too?
Okay, that's a good question. So so they have, the large projects are state-owned enterprises usually, so they have some private companies as well. But usually the private companies would supply the components, but the major projects are done by state-owned enterprises. So,
Okay.
it's owned by the government. And that's why the reason is that state-owned enterprises are not so focused on profit. So, like, even if they lose money, it's okay for them, because the goal is what's good for the country, right? So, so there's no pressure from the shareholder. There's no pressure, or else somebody will say, we need to fire the CEO. My stock price is going down. Yeah, so they have a different model. And if you look at, like, say, the financial statements of the banks in the US versus China, it's like a world of difference. It's like completely different world, In the US, the first thing, like you look at the whatever the statement for, say, JP Morgan or Citibank, Bank of America, they will say, and we made our profit went up by 7.1%, and we returned $4 billion in dividends, and we spent $17 billion on stock buyback. People are like, yay, And you look at the Chinese bank statements, and you can find them online, and they're like, we helped 400 villages build this and this and that. And we helped 7 cities built 14 solar farms to meet our goals for renewable energy. I mean, it's all about like what's good for the country, what's good for the people.
It's the model. The model's different.
Very different model.
That explains why. Because I was going to ask you a follow-up question. Do the Chinese people need to help the Americans out to get their shit together? But you know what it is? The model must be different because there's no way that we don't have the capacity to do that in this country. The stuff you're talking about, there's no way that we can't rebuild these bridges and stuff with the workforce we have. It's not their priority. And there's no profit motive, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just so madness. I mean, like you look at, the S&P 500, they spend like almost $1 trillion a year on stock buybacks.
Mm-hmm.
What the, why don't you give that money to the employees?
Yeah, right.
Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't give more money to the damn employees, So it's a very financialized model, It's like money, so obsessed with freaking money, Man, there's more to life than money, It's just, yeah. I mean, it's amazing, because you read the Bible. It's like very much about compassion, love. Jesus was always hanging out with the lepers and the prostitutes and the blind and like the bottom of the barrel people. Jesus never was like, hey, yeah, today I'm gonna be hanging out with King Herod. He has a big party for me. And then tomorrow I'll be hanging out with the taxpayers, and they just built this beautiful mansion, and they named a room after me, Jesus. So I'm gonna be celebrating, and they'll have some strip girls for me. No, like Jesus was like a communist. He was always like worried about the poor people. So. So in some sense, it's so funny that the so-called, the Christian nation of America is like so anti-people, anti-workers, anti-poor people, and while the atheistic China is focused on the lepers and the blind. What happened?
That's funny. I like that. What an interesting comment. We may return to that at a later time, but I want to segue into something else. I want to share this with the audience. So let's get this on here. This should be interesting here. So I think this is a familiar face. And I want to play a clip of this to kind of segue into the next topic. Share sound is on. Let's hear this.
So, India was, colonized by the British for like 100 plus years. And then when they left this like the ticking bomb. Okay, so which is what the British were so good at doing, right? Wherever the British went, like in the Middle East or like in Africa or like India, they would always draw the borders in a way that's going to make sure that the region will be fighting for a long time. So like say like the Middle East, they would choose these different tribes, Sunnis and Shiites and Alawites and blah blah blah, and they would draw the boundaries so that you don't have 100% Sunnis or 100% Shiites, So they would mix them up so deliberately. So these regions will be fighting forever, and then the European and the Americans can very easily manipulate them and to rule over them.
Do you hear that?
Yeah,
Does this
very
sound
profound.
Does this sound familiar?
And it's like so appropriate now.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. But I watched all of our episodes previously, and I was thinking about the Gaza Israel, just this continuous situation. Norm came onto the show again, Norm Finkelstein, and if you read his book, Gaza, it talks about all these operations, these routine operations, Operation Cast-Lead, Operation Pillar of Defense, Operation Protective Edge. Which are basically cute ways of saying Israel bombing Palestine. This has been going on for just so long. And then you had the Nakba in 48. It's not like this is just something that's a new thing, but what you said there in that clip was interesting about the boundaries. You would think that you would go into the DMZ, North Korea and South Korea, if you went to Israel, Palestine, the way they have everything, there's just security everywhere you look. And I'm saying to myself, okay, this hyper secure area that Israel basically carved out with the help of the Brits, mandatory Palestine. So how did October the 7th happen, SL? Based on your article, with all this security, high defense, how did that happen?
Yeah, so I don't believe that it just okay. So let's take a step back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are like, Hamas, oh, Hamas is terrorist, So, and then you go, oh, really? Hamas is terrorist. So who has been supporting Hamas for the last 30 years? It was Israel.
Mm-hmm.
What? What are you saying? How could Israel support Hamas? Because Hamas was the divide and rule of Israel's idea. So the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, with Yasser Arafat, was the sole representative of the Palestinians. So Israel came up, and the PLO was secular, progressive, very moderate Islam. And so Israel had this great idea. Listen, why don't we chop up the Palestinians into with two factions, and then they will fight with one another, and then we can say, hey guys, I cannot negotiate with Palestinians because there are two parties and they say different things, and unless they both agree, I cannot, I'm Israel. I really, really want to make peace, but we have these two factions and they cannot agree, so I cannot make a deal. So from the late 1980s, Israel was supporting Hamas, and even like 2 years ago, Netanyahu was saying to his people, the Likud party, hey guys, we need to keep supporting Hamas, So their thing is that, their thing is, okay, so Hamas will launch a few stupid rockets every 4 or 5 years, and it'll be awesome for us because we'll take that as an opportunity to bomb the hell out of Gaza, send them back for 20 years. And it's also good for the Israeli government, because whenever there's a war, people forget about everything. And then you rally behind the flag, you rally behind the government. So this is a win-win situation, you know. So, but Hamas was a tool, you know, for Israel, and like Hamas is a part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, so the Muslim Brotherhood was a violent organization that started like in Egypt in the 1920s, you know.
Oh wow! I didn't know
Because
it went that far back.
yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
so because after World War One, the Ottoman Empire, you know, fell, right? So the Muslims were very shocked. They were like, "Oh my God, you know, like we had one Muslim empire, now it's gone, and we are so, you know, like behind." And we, you know, so like, what is happening? So they were like going through some but trauma, self-reflection, you know. And I mean, and obviously when the bad things happen, some people, they always go to the extreme, you know. So some people were like, okay, we got defeated because we were not good Muslims. We were not pious Muslims. We forgot the words of God. We became lost. So we need to be more pious. So that was the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, the start, like in Egypt. And then, well, after World War II, the European, the empires, they all fell apart, and all these the Muslim countries, they got, you know, they started to get independence, and then the U.S. was the new empire, you know, the British Empire was going down, and now it's with time for the U.S. empire. So the U.S. empire looked at the map. They go, "Oh my God, you know, there are all these the Arab countries, and now they are starting to do their own stuff." And you know, worse, a lot of these the Arab countries were you know, pro-USSR because they had very bad memory and the experience with the colonialists. And the Soviet Union, they gave them you know, funding, weapons, whatever they needed, the support, and but they didn't like meddle in the affairs. You know, the Soviet Union, they wouldn't do like assassinations, coups, you know, force democracy, force Islam, force whatever. You know, like they just do business. You know. So the U.S. was like, "Oh my God! At this rate, we're going to lose the Middle East. We're going to lose Iraq, Egypt, Syria, everyone gone, and then we won't get cheap oil. We won't be rich, and it's very bad." So then, President, I mean, I mean, Eisenhower in 1953, he brought the Muslim Brotherhood to the White House. So the son-in-law, Syed Ramadan, was, Syed Ramadan was the son-in-law of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he came to the White House. And there's a photo you can find online, you know. And you see President Eisenhower surrounded by a whole bunch of Muslim Brotherhood, right? So the U.S. is like, "Hey, Muslim Brotherhood, we both have a common enemy, these secular, the progressive Arab leaders. We hate them because they are pro-Soviet Union, and you hate them because they are not very Islamic. They are too westernized. The women don't wear the hijab. They're wearing skirts. They're they're just bad Muslims. So we have a common enemy. Let's work together. So the friendship, the alliance between the U.S. and the Muslim Brotherhood is 70 years long or old. Okay, so it started right around this time, actually. Like in 1953, in October, November, was the alliance between the CIA and the Muslim Brotherhood. So then the CIA sent Syed Ramadan to Germany, and they built him a huge mosque, and they give him millions of dollars to spread the Muslim Brotherhood stuff. So that's the story we have. And now people are like, oh, Hamas did it. But sorry, I went off tangent. But the reason that people should be suspicious of this, the Hamas attack, was that it seems like a false flag, right? What is known as, let it happen. Okay, so false flag is when a country launches an attack on itself and it blames somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a variation. It's called let it happen on purpose, or liham. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, maybe I leave my car window down and I have a laptop in the back seat, right? Say for example, I don't like the Muslims. Okay, so in India, say I'm I'm like this. The Hindu guy who hates the Muslims. So then, what I do is I drive my car to the Muslim neighborhood. I roll down my window, and then I keep my laptop out in the open on the seat, and then I go for a walk. Right, and then I come back after 2 hours, and I go, my laptop is gone. The Muslims stole my laptop. Right, so it's like the liham, because if you look at the Israeli security, the walls that they have, the sensors, the surveillance cameras, it's like even if like a cat comes near the wall, the Israelis will know about that,
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff they did, the Hamas they did, they're like driving a pickup truck. They brought down the entire wall, and they're like driving pickup trucks through the wall, and then so Netanyahu takes 6 hours to send the IDF, and there were a lot of warnings, right? The people, the intelligence from Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
they warned Israel. They're like, hey guys, something is happening with Hamas. And if you look at the training videos of Hamas, they were practicing the paragliders during the daytime, and they released the video 1 week before the attack. And also, Israel has a lot of the informants, spies in Gaza. It's a very, very small place. It's like 5 miles by 25 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And the Israelis have satellites, drones, cameras, telescopes. They know everything that is happening in Gaza, and they spy. With the NSA's help, I'm sure they're like listening to every phone call, every app, every email. So it's just, I don't believe that it was like Oh, wow. Oh, and then the music festival. Okay. So it was full of foreigners. And it was supposed to happen far, far away
Mm-hmm.
from Gaza. And but 2 days before the before the day, they changed the venue, and they brought in all these foreigners right next to the concentration camp. To know, and then they can, but this was probably a strategy to get the whole world condemn Hamas. So then they can say, oh, but Hamas killed a German, French, Swede, and then you build this support.
There's a lot to unpack with the significance of October the 7th, which we won't really focus on much today because the focus is more so in your articles, because you wrote Q&A on Israel-Gaza conflict through Sputnik. Again, I'm going to link all your articles so the audience can see this important information. You've already drawn the connections between the Israeli intelligence and the Egyptian intelligence. You described the Muslim Brotherhood, which I knew nothing about at all, which is interesting. We know that Hamas did not start out of nowhere. You already alluded to the fact that Yasser Arafat was part of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. I think now Mahmoud Abbas is over that same organization, which is also a political party. Hamas is a political party too. Hamas won democratically. They won the seats in 2006. All this is in Norman Finkelstein's book Gaza. He lays out all this stuff. So what SL is saying and what Norm is saying, it's not fake news, it's not propaganda. I mean, it's simply the information is there. If you choose not to believe it and choose to ignore it, that's on you. But the information is there, it's pretty documented. There's a history that's already there. So this stuff is not coming out of thin air. My friend Ben Sadegh is actually coming on tomorrow with a completely different perspective. He's Jewish. He was born in Iran. He's from Tehran. I went to high school with Benny. We grew up together. He's already been on the forum twice. This will be his third appearance. He has very different takes on this. So I try to bring on different types of voices. But Benny says that October 7th has significant meaning astrologically. So he's going to bring in a different take of more of a biblical analysis, astrological. But I was doing some research myself, and I'm just going to lay these three important events that are specific to the region that happen October the 7th. And I'm just throwing this out here. You can believe what you want to believe. But I think it's interesting that October the 7th, 1951, Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister, the third government of Israel was formed October the 7th, 1951. Also, if you keep going, 1985, Palestinian terrorists seized the Italian passenger ship, the Achille Lauro, carrying 440 people, threatening to blow it up if Israel did not free 50 Palestinian prisoners. And then you go to 2001, what happens? That was the day that the United States invaded Afghanistan. That was the start of the War of Afghanistan, was October the 7th, 2001. So
wow.
All this stuff is, I'm just there. I'm sitting back eating popcorn. I don't know anything, but I don't think that all these things add up as just coincidental. I definitely believe there was a false flag for sure. You can't tell me that all this stuff just happened with all the security measures and everything else. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Unless you're knee deep into APAC, you're knee deep into all these different organizations. You may have a different perspective, but is it that easy, SL, to just change the script? Ukraine, Russia, no one's talking about it anymore, and then all of a sudden we're talking about this? Like, this is something new. This has been going on like routinely for 80 years now. Like, it's not even like, if it was like something that was out of the blue, I would be like, okay, I understand what people are saying. but this stuff is like so common. Like it's almost a common occurrence. Like Israel just casually kills thousands of people and no one bats an eye. But you know what someone was saying? If that was Hamas hiding in Israel, would they be dropping bombs on their own citizens?
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
Why don't we say that, the Israeli, the military is hiding in Tel Aviv. So we should bomb Tel Aviv.
yeah.
So it makes no sense. I mean, where else are the Hamas going to live? It's a small place, Gaza, and it's a concentration camp. So nobody can leave Gaza. Okay, uh, 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 so you cannot buy a ticket to Gaza. There's no seaport. There's no airport. There's no road that goes into Gaza. People are stuck there for life. It's like it's like a life sentence for people in Gaza. It's very, very hard to leave Gaza.
And
So
Israel controls all the motion in and out, right?
yeah, so they control everything: water, electricity, the internet, goods that go into food. Okay, so do you know what the Israelis do? They measure the calories that go into Gaza. Okay, so like every single thing that goes into Gaza, food, the Israelis, they measure the calories, and then they would divide the total number of calories by 2.4 million people to make sure that the Gazans, they get less than the required the minimum calories.
Mm.
It's like very psychotic. It's like worse than the apartheid in South Africa or wherever. It's just a violation of all human basic stuff. So nobody can do this to somebody. And it is just unbelievable. There's a guy, Miko Peled.
Mm-hmm.
He's a son of an Israeli general, and he talks about how when Israel had to bomb Gaza, they chose uh, uh, like 11:40 a.m. Okay, between 11:40 and 11:45 a.m. Why? Because that's when the two shifts in Gaza they overlap. So so Gaza doesn't have money, so the kids cannot go to school for 6-7 hours a day. So they have but two shifts. Like one from 7 to 11:30 or something, and then from 12 to 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
So like between 11:30 and noon, about 700,000 school children, or sorry, 400,000 school children, they leave school to go home, and then 400,000 second set of kids, they go from home to school. So between 11:30 and 11:45, the Gaza's streets are filled with school kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the perfect time that Israel chose to bomb Gaza, to maximize the death of school children, to maximize the death of Palestinian children.
Mm.
It's like so horrendous that even, Hitler didn't do stuff like this to Jews.
That is crazy. Yeah, that's interesting because I know in Latin America, I stayed in Costa Rica for a small amount of time, and I know that they have the siesta, they have the break in between where the kids go home and then they go back to school. It sounds very similar to what they do in the Palestinian territories. But yeah, that's heart-wrenching to hear that. It's but I had a overall question a couple questions before we go, and one is really who controls Gaza, who controls Hamas, and who controls the PLO? It must be Israel, right? Doesn't Israel control Hamas? Hamas is still part of. I mean, they govern, quote unquote, the Gaza Strip. So aren't they trying to set a precedent that we can basically kill everyone in the Gaza Strip? If Hamas is everybody, then it means everyone's a target.
Yeah.
That's the way they're trying to propagandize it.
Yeah. I mean, so so there are some, there are also business angles to it, So right on Gaza's, the coastline, which is also controlled by Israel, they have, found a gas field, natural gas. So just on the coast of Gaza and nearby, there are like 10 different oil and gas fields. So if Israel, so the fantasy is we will bomb you so bad that you guys will leave Gaza and you'll go live in other Arab countries, and then we can take over the land, and we can take over all the oil gas fields, and then we can do the same thing to West Bank. So you have about 2 million people in Gaza, and then a few kilometers away you have about 2 million people in West Bank. And so the Israeli goal is just to get rid of everybody. All this land belongs to me, all the oil gas belongs to me. And then they want the Golan Heights, which has lots and lots of natural gas. And it's being, so they stole that from
Syria.
So, I mean, at this rate, they just want to have a huge country, Israel. They don't even have enough people. They just want land to go drill oil, gas. And then there's also some crazy plan to build a canal. There'll be the competition to Suez Canal. So it's called the Ben Gurion Canal. So they have this Ben Gurion canal that if you look at the map of what they want to do, it goes right through Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of business angle to it. So I think so if I want to do some the conspiracy stuff, I would say with two main things, One is the business angle to take over all the oil gas and just make the world accept the ethnic cleansing, So just make it a fact. Yeah, we bomb people and they go live in other countries, and that's the end of it, So just make it into something that is so normal, right? So that's number one. Number two is it provides a great opportunity for the U.S. to shift from the failed war in Ukraine, and now you have a brand new war, so people forget about Ukraine. And then it could also be used as an opportunity to attack Iran, So, Iran is the big public enemy number one for the U.S. and for Israel, So, and as Wesley Clark said, they've been planning this for a long time, the famous we will take out 7 countries in 5 years. So that plan. So they were, that's why they sent so many the aircraft carriers, right? All this the nuclear powered aircraft carriers, USS Eisenhower, blah blah. Why do you need so many just to fight Hamas? Okay, So you don't need all these rockets. I mean, so many missiles and So they were planning, like they were hoping that Iran would do something dangerous, and then they would use that as an opportunity to start a new big war in the Middle East. But Iran and the Hezbollah are very smart, So the Hezbollah leader, he gave a speech a few days ago, and but everybody thought he's going to talk like a crazy terrorist, Oh, Allahu Akbar, I'm going to destroy all the Jews. But he was like so diplomatic, so polite. He really but disappointed the world. And so, but they are very smart, and they will keep attacking, but more like the hybrid war.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've already sliced Gaza in half. That's what they're saying. That Israel has gone in the ground invasion, and they have sliced Gaza in half. So I don't know how much of that is propaganda, or how much of that is true. So we'll see. But it's sad, and I don't think they will succeed. I think that the Hezbollah and others, they have far better weapons than Hamas. The Hezbollah has the anti-tank missiles, drones, rockets, 500 kilogram of explosives that can go 10, 15 kilometers. So we'll see.
I'm still trying to figure out how this Hamas thing, it doesn't make sense at all. Like the massacre, like it doesn't make sense. Like how that, like the security breach itself doesn't make sense. Like I can't even go into the event itself because that doesn't make sense. Like the fact that they were able to, and I haven't heard of Mossad at all. I haven't heard anything about Israeli intelligence. Mossad's been awfully quiet, and all of this, I haven't heard anybody say anything about Mossad.
Yeah,
And usually,
exactly.
Mossad is always implemented in something, if it pertains to Israel. But it's almost like Netanyahu is like the figurehead. He's up front and center. And then, he called the Palestinians, he called them the Amaleks, which again, we're going to get Ben on tomorrow, and he's going to use all these biblical references. But Netanyahu is invoking the Bible in justifying killing the Palestinians. That basically the devil. I mean, he's using all this scripture to like carry out these genocidal actions or whatever. It's just absolutely sickening, really. But it's like, to me, is Israel in control of this? Israel can't do this stuff without the help of outside aid. This isn't possible without the constant funding from the United States government, all the collaboration from the Western governments. This is not even possible without this continuous aid to Israel. Israel also has a unique position where the dual citizenship lens. If you look at the prime ministers of Israel, most of them weren't even born in Israel. Most of them were born in Russia, Poland, Germany. Do people not see how this doesn't add up? None of this adds up at all. But I guess my question for you was, like, where's the Arab presence? Where is who's resisting Israel besides Hezbollah? Like, who else is going to come in here diplomatically and try to do something about this? Is it just the Palestinians at the mercy of the Israelis? Like, who do they have in the region that could help them out? I mean, who's trying to broker peace?
And all these the Arab countries are just spineless cowards, and they have
Is
all
there a
these.
reason for that? Like, what's the reason? Why are they not doing anything?
They're just, vassals of the empire. They have all these billions of dollars in Swiss banks and Bank of America. They have kids, studying in London and Massachusetts. It's just, yeah. But what these people don't realize is that Israel is not going to stop with just Gaza, right? So once they get Gaza, they will do the same thing to West Bank, and then they're going to come after these same the Arab countries. People think they are safe because they live in Kuwait, UAE, and they have all this wealth. So they're like, man, why bother with all this stuff? We have all the money, and we get to travel around the world. We are just happy, so let's not rock the boat. But Israel is not going to stop with just that. It's going to spread like, they're going to take over Syria, and then they will attack. There was this the New York Times article in 2013, and in that they released this Pentagon map, so you can search for that online. It's called, how 5 countries will become 14. So the U.S. and the deep state, they have plans to chop up all these the Arab countries in So from a humanitarian and from a logical point of view, the Arab countries should be supporting Palestinians.
But the scary part about this SL is something we were talking about before, and this forum, a large part of the creation of this forum is around this idea of not conspiracy theories per se, but a lot of people just don't believe that there's such thing as a deep state. But what you're telling me is that the only thing that's going on now is that the deep state in Qatar or UAE or Saudi Arabia, whatever, these people really don't care. The regular citizens are the ones that are struggling, but it's like the people who have the money and the resources, they don't care. Like, they could care less. Like you said, their kids are being educated in the West. Why would they care about what's going on in the Palestinian territories when they're full of wealth? They have all the oil money and everything else. It's so sickening if that's the reason. That they're just kind of just letting their hands go, like, whatever happens. It's so sad if that's the case.
Yeah. And but there are people who plan, like this is their job, is to plan the world, but 10, 20, 30, 40 years in advance, right? Because there is a lot at stake, so you want to maintain the American century, you want to maintain the power of Goldman Sachs and Lockheed Martin, and they need to plan in advance. So we can only guess what kinds of psychotic things these people are planning, But like say, but things like World War I, World War II, even like 9/11. So I don't believe the official narrative. For me, it was the inside job. It was a plan to make it happen. They even these the neocons, they wrote a paper called the Project for New American Century, PNAC, and they released the paper on September 2000. Okay, 1 year before the attack. And in that, they lay out their plan for the empire, the American empire, and they say very clearly, man, the American people are not ready for another big war, but we need a big war to reform the world. They say that very clearly. They talk about it like it's like a matter of fact. It's like, yeah, well, but Kiko, has too much money, so we need to rob him. So let's see what can we do. It's like that. It's like they talk about it like so, yeah, in like sort of the academic way. And they said something very shocking. So they said, unless there is an event like Pearl Harbor, we cannot get the American public and the world to support huge wars. So they need something shocking. So when there is shocking, you cannot think. It's like COVID. Oh my God, virus! And then the mind stops working, and then people just freak out, and they obey, and you can spend trillions of dollars, and nobody will care. So there were so many things about 9/11. Like at the day before 9/11. Donald Rumsfeld was like, yeah, we did like an audit and we couldn't find a couple of trillions of dollars or what happened, and then after 9/11, well, everybody forgot what happened to those $2 trillion or whatever. So, yeah, the evil stuff is beyond what the normal people like us can imagine, and for them, the ends justify the means. The government of Israel has a Twitter account, and it's called @Israel, and they tweeted a few years back. Yeah. So it's just called @Israel, and they tweeted a few years back where they said the strong survives, might is right, the weak will always lose. It was like very, it's like mafia language, It's like, yeah, I'm strong. I kill people. I take their land. What are you going to do about it? Yeah, that's how the world works, Tony.
Oh gosh, that's terrible.
Terrible. So, so there are a lot of sick people with sick plans. So we'll see. I don't know how Russia and China will respond, because they certainly don't want a huge war in the Middle East. They don't want Iran to lose. It's a very vital piece in the geopolitical puzzle. So that's why China brought Saudi Arabia and Iran together, for peace. So China was hoping, oh my God, once we have peace in the Middle East, we can do so much more business. It's, that was going to be awesome. And now these people, they come and create absolute chaos and
yeah, it's sad, but I think we're going to end here because we could talk on and on. But I want my audience to know, Mr. Kanthan, where can they reach you, in case they had a question or comment, or just to see your work? Like, what would be the fastest way to reach you?
So you can go to Substack .slkanthan, or you can go to Twitter @Kanthan2030, 2030. So by the way, I chose 2030 because from now until 2030 are the most dangerous years,
Okay. And I'll make sure to link your latest articles up top when I share your articles in the episode description. And also, SL would probably appreciate it if you were willing to buy him a beer as well. I'm going to link that episode in the description for his hard work. If you want to donate a little bit to SL, because of his writings, he can write more if people support him. And hopefully SL has a YouTube channel up and going again. He has one hidden. I'm not, I might link it. I've linked it in the previous episodes. But hopefully when you get this new podcast, we can follow you too, and hear you even more often. But we want to say thank you so much here from Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. You've been such a great resource to us the last 6 7 months, and we can't wait to have you on later down the road. Beautiful people, this has been a wonderful episode 77, and I can't wait to release it later on today. And SL, I'm sure, will share it with his audience and everyone else. But enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.
Thank you, Kiko. It's always a great pleasure chatting with you.
Yes, I didn't mean to keep you over too long, but take care of yourself, get some rest, and I know I got some stuff to do, but we will talk soon.
All right, Kiko. Bye.
Okay, see ya.